Texas Panhandle, August 1872. The sun was just beginning to claw its way above the horizon when Gideon Hart pulled his horse to a stop outside the trading post in Dry Creek Junction, dust settling around his boots as he dropped to the ground. He had not come looking for a wife. He had come for horse feed and nails, but there she was, dirty, thin, and quiet as a ghost chained to a post like a dog someone had forgotten. $10, said the man in the stained vest, tipping his chin toward the girl. She ain't right in the head, but she can haul water or sweep a floor. Gideon stared at her. She did not look up. Her dress was barely more than a sack, one sleeve torn and falling off her shoulder. There was dried blood on her lip. "What's your name?" he asked. She flinched, then swallowed. "Selene," she said. Her voice cracked like she had not used it in days. The man laughed. "Calls herself that now. Last week it was Martha. Who knows?" Gideon reached into his coat and pulled out a $10 gold eagle. He held it up. "Unchain her." "You serious?" Gideon's jaw tightened. Now, the man snatched the coin and went for the key. The chain clattered to the ground. Selene did not move. She just stood there, staring at the dirt. "You're free," Gideon said. She looked up at him then, slow and wary. "Free," he nodded once. "I will not hurt you. Come on. Let's get you fed." She followed him like a shadow, silent, her bare feet dragging in the dust. They rode double on his horse, her hands gripping the saddle horn like it might save her from falling off the earth. She did not speak again until they reached his homestead, a small cabin on open land ringed with cottonwoods and sky. "Why did you do it?" she asked as he helped her down. Gideon looked her in the eye. "Because no one should be treated like that. You are not a stray." Selene blinked at him. "No one's ever paid for me before, not to keep me alive anyway." "I did not pay to keep you," he said. "I paid to get you free." Inside the cabin, she stood near the door while he set bread and jerky on the table. Her hands trembled when she picked up the cup of water. Gideon noticed how she kept glancing at the corners of the room, like she expected someone to step out of the shadows. "You can sleep here," he said. "I will take the barn." Selene shook her head quickly. "I will sleep on the floor. You will sleep in the bed." His voice left no room for argument. "You are not a servant. You are safe here." She looked like she wanted to believe him, but her eyes were still tight with fear. That night, when the stars came out bright and hard above the plains, Gideon sat on a hay bale in the barn and listened to the wind. He had not meant to bring a girl home, but something in her eyes, like she had nothing left, but still stood tall, had caught at him. Selene did not sleep much. She lay stiff on the edge of his bed, fully clothed, arms crossed over her chest. By morning, she had washed her face and combed her hair with her fingers. She still wore the same rags, but her back was straighter. "I will work," she said. "You do not have to feed me for nothing. You do not owe me anything," he said. "I do," she insisted. "You gave me back my name." Gideon let her sweep the porch and feed the chickens, but he kept her away from the heavy work. She did not ask questions, only watched him with eyes like the sky before a storm, full of things she did not say. By the third day, she laughed. Just once. He had tripped over the goat trough, and when he looked up, she was covering her mouth with both hands, eyes wide like she had not meant to let it out. "I have not laughed in years," she said softly. He smiled. "Well, I will try to fall more often." She looked away, but her cheeks turned pink. A week passed. Gideon came in one afternoon to find a stew bubbling on the stove. The cabin smelled like rosemary and onions. Selene was barefoot, her dress pinned to fit better, sleeves repaired with mismatched thread. "You made this," she nodded, nervously watching his face. He sat down, took a bite, and closed his eyes. "This is the best thing I have tasted in months." Her lips twitched. "I used to cook for my father before." He did not ask what came after. He knew that kind of silence. That night, as the moon rose silver over the plains, Gideon found her sitting on the porch steps, a quilt around her shoulders. "Do you miss anyone?" she asked, eyes fixed on the horizon. "My brother," he said. "He died in the war. I came out west to forget." Selene nodded. I had two sisters. Younger. They died in Missouri when the cholera came. After that, my mother gave up, sold me off to some trader and drank herself to death. Gideon sat beside her, the wood warm beneath them. I never thought anyone would call me Mrs., she whispered. Not really. Not after everything. He looked at her then, really looked. Her eyes were not broken, they were strong. You still have a whole life ahead of you, he said. She turned her head slowly. Do you think someone like me could ever start over? I think someone like you is stronger than most, he said. And yes, you could. She stared at him for a long time. Then, without a word, she leaned her head against his shoulder. Gideon did not move. He just let her rest there, warm and close, while the night wrapped around them like a promise. By the second week, the wind shifted. Not in the weather, but in the way Selene moved through the days, less like she was waiting for something to go wrong, more like she was learning the shape of peace. She still rose early, but now it was to beat Gideon to the stove, determined to have coffee ready before he came in from checking the stock. Thought I was the one taking care of you, he said one morning, wiping the sweat from his collarbone as he entered. You were, she said, handing him a tin cup. Now I want to return the favor. Her hands no longer trembled when she reached for things, and she had begun humming low, tuneless bits of melody that came out when she thought no one was listening. That Sunday, they took the wagon to the tiny clapboard church 4 miles south. She wore a dress stitched from flour sacks, dyed with black walnut hulls, and trimmed with pieces of a curtain she'd found in the loft. Her hair was braided back tight, and she kept her chin high, though her fingers clutched the edge of the seat like it might vanish beneath her. Gideon drove steady, saying little. He glanced over once, saw her looking at the horizon as if weighing whether to run or stay. You don't have to go in if you're not ready, he said. I want to, she replied, but I'd rather not walk in alone. He nodded. You won't. The preacher's wife, a stout woman with sharp eyes, offered a seat near the back. Selene kept her gaze forward, lips pressed tight. After the service, a few of the women offered polite greetings, but most kept their distance. No one asked who she was. Back in the wagon, Selene let out a long breath. I thought they'd stare. They did, Gideon said plainly. But they'll forget. I don't want to be a charity case. You're not, she turned to him. Then what am I? His hands tightened on the reins. You're someone I respect. She looked away, blinking fast. That's not what people see. He didn't answer that. Just clicked his tongue and urged the horse forward. That evening, she brought out a small bundle from a nailed-shut crate she'd pried open in the loft. Inside were bits of cloth, a broken comb, and a hand-sized piece of mirror. I found these in the barn, she said. Do they belong to someone? They were my mother's. Before she passed, she sent a few things west with me. I never unpacked them. Selene ran her thumb over the edge of the mirror. Do you mind if I keep the comb? It's yours now, he said. She was quiet a moment. She must have been kind if she raised a man like you. He didn't answer, but his face softened just a little. That night, as the fire died low, she brought her chair closer to his. Her hand found the edge of his sleeve. People say all kinds of things about women like me, she said. They say we're ruined, that we're nothing but what's been done to us. He turned to her, watching her face in the firelight. I want to believe I can be more than that, she said. But I don't know how. Gideon didn't speak right away. Then he lifted her hand and held it between his, rough palms folding gently around her fingers. The past can't be changed, he said, but it also doesn't get to decide what you are tomorrow. She didn't cry. She just leaned in until her forehead touched his shoulder. He stayed still, letting her be close, the fire crackling softly between them and the night outside holding its breath. By the next morning, she had washed his shirts and hung them in the sun, and when he came back from the creek, she was sitting on the porch step, mending the hem of her dress with the same careful concentration she gave to everything now. I was thinking, she said, not looking up, that I might try keeping a few hens of my own, ones I tend separate. Maybe sell eggs come spring, he grinned. You planning to take over my operation? No, she said, eyes twinkling. Just thinking it might be good to have something that's mine. He walked past her, pausing only to tug lightly on a loose strand of her braid. She looked up, surprised. I think that's a fine idea, he said. We'll build you a coop. She smiled, then not the small, careful kind from before, but something fuller, easier. It was the first time he saw what she might look like without fear tracing every edge of her. And he knew, without question, he wanted to see that smile again. As often as she'd let him. Late September brought cooler mornings and a hush to the land, as if the wind had agreed to keep its voice low. Gideon was mending a broken gatepost near the south pasture when Selene came to him, carrying a folded scrap of paper in one hand and a crooked little smile he hadn't seen before. I found something strange tucked inside that old ledger you keep in the loft, she said, offering the paper. He wiped his hands on his trousers and unfolded it carefully. The ink had faded, but the handwriting was even, deliberate, a letter never sent. From your brother, she asked. He ran a thumb along the fold. Yeah, he must have left it in there before shipping it out. He looked up. You read it, I started to, then stopped, thought it might not be mine to read. He nodded. Thank you. She sat beside him in the grass, knees pulled up under her skirt. Did he write much? Not often, but when he did, it was always like this, honest, plain. No wasted words. Selene plucked a blade of wild rye, twisting it between her fingers. Did he ever talk about what he wanted after? Only once. He said he wanted to raise sheep in Colorado. Thought maybe he'd marry the girl from the dry goods store back home. What happened to her? She waited. Then she married a wheelwright in Kansas City. Selene nodded, gazing toward the horizon where the cottonwoods stood against the sky. I used to think about the kind of house I'd have. When I was little, I'd draw it in the dirt with a stick, one room but with a window that opened wide. He looked at her. You could still have that, I know, she said quietly, but sometimes it's hard to believe in things again. They sat for a long while without speaking. The sun shifted. A buzzard circled high above the ridge. That evening she brought him a tin plate with warm beans and cornbread, her apron smudged with flour. He was seated on the back stoop, boots off, his bare feet resting in the dirt. I saw a hawk dive near the creek, she said. Caught something fast. Made me think there's a kind of beauty in how quick things can change. He gestured to the space beside him. Sit, eat, she did, tucking her legs beneath her. I've been thinking about winter. We'll need more wood, and I could start preserving the root vegetables. You've got a way of seeing what needs doing before I do. I had to, she said. Back then, if I didn't notice what was needed, it turned bad. He looked at her. You don't have to live like that anymore. I know, she said, but it's still in me, that edge. I don't mind it, he said. Helps me keep the place running. She smiled, faint but real. You'd let me stay through the winter then, he turned toward her. I want you to stay as long as you want to. Selene's eyes dropped to her lap. I've been wondering something, all right. If I stay, what would people think? He considered her question. Some might talk, but they don't know you. They don't know me. I don't want to be a shadow in someone else's house. I want to belong. He reached over, took the edge of her hand. Then stay and make it yours. Selene was quiet, then lifted her eyes. Would you call me Mrs.? I would, he said. If you'd let me. A breeze passed between them, carrying the scent of drying grass and wood smoke. She leaned into him, her head against his arm. I'd like that, she whispered. He shifted, letting his arm rest around her shoulders. Then it settled. They stayed there until the last of the light faded, the sky turning to ash and blue above the plains. The world was quiet and nothing pressed at them. No past, no judgment. Just a man and a woman deciding, gently, to begin. By the first frost, Selene had planted garlic in the soft earth behind the cabin, her hands steady, her eyes toward spring. Gideon brought her cedar boards salvaged from a neighbor's collapsed smokehouse, and she used them to line the walls of the chicken coop they'd built together. The hens had taken to her, following her steps with gentle clucks, as if they recognized something in her quiet presence. One evening, after supper, Gideon came in from the barn with a thin bundle wrapped in oilcloth. He laid it on the table without a word. Selene dried her hands on her apron slowly, watching him. "You once said you wanted something of your own," he said. "Thought maybe this could be a start." She untied the cloth and unfolded it gently. Inside was a leather-bound ledger, its pages clean, the corners still sharp. A pencil rested in the spine groove. "For the egg tallies," he added, "or whatever else you might want to keep." She touched the cover, then looked at him. "You remembered." "I remember everything you tell me." She didn't answer right away, but the way she closed the book and held it to her chest said more than words could. Later that night, Gideon sat tying knots in a length of rope, boots off, the lamplight soft on his shoulder. Selene pulled a chair close and slid her bare feet beneath a folded wool blanket. She didn't speak until he set the rope aside. "I've been reading the good book again," she said. "Found it tucked behind the flower bin." He nodded. "That was my mother's. I figured. There's a pressed violet on one page, from the hill behind our old house." He looked at her. "You reading it for comfort? I think I'm reading it for direction." She smiled faintly, "though I don't expect it to answer every question." "What are you asking?" She hesitated. "How to be with someone when you've never known how." Gideon leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "You don't have to know everything now. It's not a test. I keep thinking I might break something without meaning to." "You won't," he said. "But if you do, I'll still be here." She reached for his hand across the space between them. "I don't want to be afraid of being close anymore." "You don't have to be." For the first time, she laced her fingers through his. The wind rustled outside, brushing against the shutters with the hush of dry leaves lifting and falling. The lamp hissed softly. Neither of them moved to fill the silence. It had become something they shared, not something to escape. The next morning, Selene stepped out with a tin bucket, her shawl drawn close. Frost glittered on the grass, thin and white. She paused, watching Gideon drive fence posts along the north line. His sleeves were rolled, breath rising in small clouds. He saw her and lifted his hand. She waved back, then crossed the yard toward the coop. Inside, 2 of the hens had laid. She gathered the eggs carefully and wrapped them in a square of cotton she'd stitched from an old feed sack. In the doorway of the cabin, she stopped and looked out toward the edge of the land where the cottonwoods stood bare-limbed and tall. She whispered, "I belong here." And she did. When Gideon returned that night, his coat lined with dust and the scent of wood smoke, she met him at the door. There was no hesitation in her hands as she helped him out of the coat, no apology in her voice when she said, "I saved you a piece of pie." He cupped her cheek, thumb brushing the corner of her mouth. "I'm going to ask you something soon," he said. "But I want to make sure you know it's yours to answer." She leaned into his touch. "Ask me when you're ready. I already know what I want." He kissed her then, soft and sure, like he'd been waiting for the moment and found it exactly where it belonged. Outside, the wind curled around the cabin like a promise kept. Inside, warmth held. And stayed. The first snow fell soft and early, blanketing the earth in quiet. Selene stood at the window before dawn, watching flakes drift through the dark like feathers shaken loose from the sky. Her breath left a faint patch on the glass. Behind her, Gideon moved slow with sleep, dragging on his boots by the hearth, his hair still mussed. "You ever had a Christmas tree?" he asked, stretching his back. She turned, pulling her shawl tight. "No." "Not after I was small." He reached for his coat hanging by the door. "There's a tall spruce by the ridge. Might be time it came to better use." She stepped into his path, hand resting on his chest. "Let me come." "That ground's slick, you'll fall." "I've crossed worse," she said, chin lifting. He studied her a beat before nodding. "All right, then. But if you twist your ankle, I'm not carrying you back." "You would," she said, eyes warming. By mid-morning, they were hauling the tree across the yard, dragging it by the trunk as powder kicked around their boots. Selene's cheeks were flushed from the cold hair damp where flakes had melted. She looked younger in the snow, though her eyes still held the watchfulness that never quite left. Once they had it standing upright in a barrel packed with stones, she stepped back, wiping her hands. "It's crooked." "So am I," Gideon said, brushing snow from his hat. "Seems fair." Inside, she sliced strips from a worn petticoat, twisting them into bows. He whittled small stars from kindling, tying them with twine. They worked without much talk, the stove ticking and wind scratching at the walls. That evening, she lit a stub of candle and placed it near the top. The flame flickered, casting faint gold across the room. "I never thought I'd see something like this again," she said. He leaned against the wall, arms crossed. "You'll see it every year if you want." She met his eyes, then crossed the room and set her palm to his jaw. "There's something I've been meaning to ask, all right. When you said you were going to ask me something soon, did you mean it?" He nodded. "I did, just wanted to wait until you weren't looking over your shoulder." Her hand dropped, but her gaze didn't falter. "Then ask me now." He stepped close, the space between them full of breath and firelight. "Will you marry me, Selene?" "Yes," she said, without hesitation. "I want to build a life here, with you." He kissed her, there by the tree, with her hands in his and nothing left unsaid. They married 2 weeks later, in the same church where she'd first sat quiet and unsure. The preacher's wife offered her a dress, plain but well kept, and pinned her hair with sprigs of juniper. Gideon wore his best shirt and the same boots he'd worn the day he found her. Afterward, there was pie and coffee poured from a dented kettle, and the neighbors who once kept their distance now offered hands and kind words. No one asked about Selene's past. They saw what she had become, a woman of calm strength, eyes clear, shoulders squared with purpose. That night, back at the cabin, she took off her shoes and stepped barefoot across the floor, candlelight flickering on the walls. "You sure about this?" she asked, voice low. He came to her slowly, touching her hand. "I've never been more certain." They lay beside each other with the covers pulled to their chins, the world hushed around them. Her head rested on his chest, his hand on her back. There was no fear in her anymore, only peace, warm and steady between them. Over the months that followed, the coop filled with healthy hens, and Selene's ledger filled with neat rows of numbers and notes. She sold eggs to neighbors and traded preserves for goods. The cabin grew fuller not with things, but with comfort. She hung a braid of dried sage by the door. He built a bench beneath the cottonwoods. In spring, she planted a row of sunflowers along the fence, and he carved her name into the beam above the porch. One evening in June, she sat on that bench, a letter in her lap. "From Kansas City," she said as he joined her. "A woman I knew." She got out too. He glanced at the page. "You going to write her back?" She nodded. "I want her to know it's possible. That safety's not just something other people find." He reached over and took her hand. "You made something here, Selene, with your own 2 hands." "I did," she said. But not alone. As the sun dipped low, they stayed there, watching the fields sway under the sky. His thumb traced her knuckles, slow and steady. Her head leaned to his shoulder. The past had carved deep marks in both of them. But here, on this land, in this life they had built with patience and grit, there was only forward, only warmth, only love that had been earned and chosen again each day.